The downside of London's success is that this city has become increasingly unaffordable to anyone who isn't a hedge fund billionaire. What should be done about London's affordability problem? How can this city be made more welcoming to people of middle incomes?
So, what's pushing up housing prices is a combination of rapidly increasing demand with essentially vertical supply, right? So it's both the demand side of the market and the supply side of the market.
And the demand side both reflects the economic success of the city and the flow of people who actually want to live here just to live here, right? It's both things are going on, presumably.
Yeah, so look, in fact, we kind of know that given how high house prices are relative to incomes, that there must be a big chunk of people who want to live here because the amenity offer of the city is incredibly attractive to them. And in some ways, when you see the supply stuff, it's a no-brainer. You don't need the economist's demand and supply diagram with the vertical supply curve in. It's a city with an effective labour market of 8, 12 million, pick your favourite measure. We build 30,000 houses a year. And 30, 40,000. We're building 110,000 for the UK as a whole, population 60 million. Right. That kind of housing supply is just going to lead you into trouble. Now, the slightly more tricky thing is to convince people that it is the planning system that is artificially restricting that supply and not the fact that the country is full up.
Right.
Okay? So, there's a number of ways to do that. We could just simply point to the fact that only about 7 to 8% of the land area is developed.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sort of headline fact.
Mm-hmm.
You can do anecdotal things, which say we could go to the Greenbelt in London and build 1 kilometre around existing railway stations and add 1 million to housing supply, right?
Right.
So what stops developers from going and building within probably a mile actually of the stations, it's the fact that we don't allow them to, because we have these green belts that are very, very tightly drawn around cities that prevent any development from happening. So,
and to be clear, what at least I'm hearing you say is that you could do fairly compact development around rail stations within the Greenbelt and not touch much of the Greenbelt at all and still deliver a fair amount of...
Oh, it's tiny. I think it's like 2% of the Greenbelt. I can't remember the exact number, but 1 mile around each of the existing railway stations, trivial.
Right.
Absolutely trivial percentage take of land. Now, the other way to do it is do it the sort of econometric analysis that you and I like to see, where you basically say, all right, can I look at places and try and understand how much of the increase in prices is to do with the restrictions that we put in place. Oh, actually, it was your work on where we estimate the planning restriction as a tax on commercial development, right? And if I remember right, you guys estimated Manhattan, we basically see somewhere between a 0 and 50% markup against construction costs.
Right, right. So the point being, the marginal cost of building more space in a city like London is always the next floor. Exactly. And if the space is valued at double what it costs to build, it means something about regulation is pushing up prices. 50%.
Right, so the fact that you think it's double shows that you come from America.
Right.
Right?
You think it's 4 times, right?
8. So where we're sitting now, in fact, it's always a little bit confusing with Alice because we cross between the local borough of Westminster and the local borough of Camden. And I think where we're sitting now is just Westminster. I think across the street there is Camden. Now, Westminster, we estimate that's Hilborough and Cheshire estimate that at 800%.
Holy cow.
Now, if you go out to Canary Wharf, we estimated at about 400%.
So the extra space is 8 times more valuable than the cost of building it. And we're talking about building it, we're not taking any extra land, we're just adding an extra floor.
Well, that's the sort of estimates they get. Now how do they manage that? It's because the height restrictions are incredible. Right. So one of the things that people really didn't like about the Shard, which is London's tallest building, is the fact that it interferes with the sight line from Primrose Hill in northwest London to across the St Paul's, So that's where those that's how those stories play out on the ground. So if you take this area here, 99.9% of the area is covered by conservation area or a height restriction, right? Or some kind of sight line or some other kind of covenanted restriction on what you can do. The net result of that is 800%.
It's so easy to get lost in the romance of St. Paul's survival from World War II, and unquestionably that's magical, and unquestionably there are views that are worthwhile keeping. Lots of views which are worthwhile keeping. But it's also true that we need to think about trade-offs. And every time we say no to buildings, we're saying no to a new family that wants to come to London and find a future for themselves there. We're saying that all of the other middle-income people who are struggling in the city have to pay a bit more for housing. And even something as magical as a view of St. Paul's, we need at least to think about those trade-offs, because in fact it's ordinary people who pay the price when we get involved in magical thinking.